Hey everybody, welcome back to nerding out with me about building a trading system on the Gemini Exchange. Or if you've never been here before, welcome as well. We're just putting on our nerd hats and we are looking at data about price trends in the crypto markets and really just trying to have a bit of fun, maybe predicting price swings. So last time we had a little update. I had just like a submarine had been underwater working on data pipelines for the past few months. I emerged. I finally reached the surface and poked my head up above water to start actually building models based on the data pipelines that we've been building. And this is what we saw. I had taken an initial stab at building a random forest model, and in that previous video, I had said, these initial results look promising. Which here they are, by the way, once again, where all these little blue dots down here in the bottom half of the chart are showing us points of interest where the training of the model, it's indicating, okay, we would have made a purchase here. And so that's nice to see that a bunch of all these red dots that we wouldn't necessarily want to buy at, that the even a basic model was smart enough to say, let's not buy here based on the features that we provided in the, the training that we had put the model through. It's saying, no, we're not going to buy here. Yes, we will buy here. And even though this isn't the perfect spot, maybe you would want to buy it here. I'm fine with this. The model is picking up that there's been a significant dip, and it's buying at the right time, in my opinion. You can't get it perfect every time because at the point the decision is made here, nobody knows that the price is going to keep slipping down. And we do see that, the conditions are such that even when you buy right here, where the trading system would have made this decision, the price does bounce back up and that would become profitable. So in the future, there's a little bit of a game to play, just like we're making all these decisions here on when we wouldn't want to buy. When we flip this around and we say, hey, where do we want to sell? This is going to be a challenge because I'm seeing that just like how with all these potential points of interest for buying, we also have potential points of interest for selling. And, you don't want to hit a local maximum, a tiny little bump right here and then sell. It's kind of like a premature selling. You're losing out on all this profitability. So there is going to be a lot of thought going into, okay, how do we also not just train this thing on when to buy the dips, but how do we know that this is actually a peak that we would like to sell at? Or maybe you're not at a peak, but you've reached a certain threshold of profitability and whatnot. Okay, so this is what we saw in the last update, and I had mentioned at the time that I wanted to take a look at neural networks and PyTorch. I'm still figuring that out a bit. The initial stab at the model was like, it was so bad, the performance of the neural network in comparison. It's probably just because I don't know what I'm doing. I use in real life, I've used mostly regression, logistic regression, and random forest models or xgboost. And so that's what I feel most comfortable with. Now you put me in this territory of neural networks, and there's just so much I have to figure out that I think I overfit the shit out of everything I do with neural networks, and I don't have millions of samples to train this thing on. So deep learning is kind of out the window, right? Like, it's going to be shallow learning. It's going to be medium learning at best in the kiddie pool with the amount of data that we have to train up these networks. So I don't know, maybe sticking with like xgboost is probably going to be where I go. So in the spirit of that, if we take a look at this, I did take the models that we were working on. So we had random forest, basic neural network model, and then xgboost, and I just ran with xgboost. It seemed to have some performance benefits over just the straight up random forest. Of course, I'm not really pumping a whole lot of time here into searching for all the right hyperparameters and whatnot. But just out of the box and with the, throwing data at a wall, seeing what sticks, the xgboost just has phenomenal performance right out the box. And it's making decisions that like it seems like I can train it. And one of the funny things I saw here with the xgboost model was when I tried to do some grid search optimization and say, hey, let's kind of comb through all these hyperparameters, kind of like you would do the kind of textbook way that you would go about finding what are my optimal hyperparameters. I landed on something that was just total garbage. Not what we're seeing here. This is actually pretty decent, but I was saying like the maximum depth of the max depth hyperparameter is going to be 3, and we're going to have a gamma of 0.25 and blah blah blah. And then when I turned around and I made predictions with it, all the predictions, all the decisions the model was making was trash. And so there's this kind of interesting balance here between what's the textbook academic best way to kind of fit your model, and then empirically finding that some of that, like that sweet spot that apparently exists from grid search, doesn't actually translate to this thing making great decisions. And so I've been playing around with that a bit, and where I'm kind of landing is I want to use the training data sets as a real way to kind of get the model in the right ballpark. And then I don't want to kind of lean on these accuracy and F1 score, precision and recall, because the problem is that the way the data is labeled just isn't super perfect, right? Like if the bot decides to buy right here, and I labeled it as it should have bought right here, then that's going to be counted as a miss. Whereas in reality, if it's buying here, that's fine. That's actually correct. And so, maybe I'm just not smart enough yet, and I haven't figured out a good way to kind of tell it that anything in this range is good, without completely, ending up with a data set where I have way too many points of interest that are like, yes, buy here. It's a hard problem to solve, but I think that the way I'm doing it now is pretty good, and kind of eyeballing how this thing performs on data it's never seen before after training it up seems to be getting me with decisions that the model is making that I'm happy with. So what we have, just as a refresher of how this thing is trained, like here we can see that we're looking at a limited time frame. This is like early November to early December. And the reason for that is that this is actually a real simulation. This is me pulling data from the API, and I have pickled, that's a real term, I've pickled a model that I trained, an XGBoost model, and I pickled it and saved it, stored it away for, for this symbol, let's say Mana USD, and then I just took in new data from the API that this thing was not trained on, so a time frame that no coin, no symbol was trained on. I trained the Mana USD on symbols that aren't Mana USD in the first place. So like all this data from May all the way up to November, I trained this thing, but I left Mana USD out just to completely isolate myself from overfitting this coin to its own, its own trends. And so it's trained on every other symbol that isn't Mana USD, and then it's trained on a time frame from May up to early November. And then we collected this data from the API, and we just said, for example, here at each one of these decision points, it has no idea where the price is going. It only knows about this price it's at and everything that's happened before it. And we end up with these decisions. This is the pickled model predicting prices on data that it's never seen before, future data points. And we can see, this is, I'm pretty happy with this. This is looking fairly good. This one up here is a little bit sketchy, but I know why this is happening. This is kind of the way I'm labeling the data sets to train these models. I noticed that the problem is, like, if I buy here, right now you're going to hit some local maximums on the way writing up this curve. And so just eyeballing this as a human, you would say, in hindsight, oh, I would want to buy here and then look at how many gains I could get if I could sell here. But that's not how it's going to go in practice, because in practice, you're going to buy here. You're not going to know what the hell's going to happen to the price. And if the price hits this little bump up here, you're going to sell. But then in real practice, like if you have a kind of shitty bot, like what I put into production last year, where you're just saying anytime you're at a local maximum, you've hit a certain threshold of profitability, you might end up buying right here and then you sell here. And so the reason that this thing is making decisions like this, where it sees this little spike and it's buying here, is in all of the data that I've been labeling. We're using supervised learning, and so I have to come up with these labels. And while I could try to just apply a flat mathematical rule, like if this condition, then label it as a 1, like we would buy, else label it a 0. I'm doing that to kind of isolate points of interest, but then in order to make something that's not going to come up with complete trash predictions, you really do have to comb through all of those points of interest and start to label things as like, this is a place where I would really like a model that if it was found itself in this situation, it would be buying. And then we have, hundreds of features or whatever that we can throw at this thing where it's going to pick up all the patterns of like, here, there seems to be a relationship between all these points that you're selecting as where you would buy. And so this thing's just kind of picked up on that. And it's saying, I think basically if I could hop inside this model's head, it's saying, all right, we're on an upward curve and we have this slight dip, which means we probably already sold down here or we sold right here. And now we have an opportunity to get back in. And it does so right here. So this is nice because if you end up in a situation where you're kind of on an upward, tilt, if your model's really strict and it only buys after a severe dip, then you're going to buy in and then you're going to sell at the first opportunity, but then you're going to have to wait all the way until you get all the way up to the tippity top of the mountain before you have an opportunity for the thing to dip and for you to buy back in. So there's this kind of balance you have to strike of the model where like if we know that we're in the situation where we buy and then we might hit a local maximum where the model says, hey man, it's time to get out. Let's close off this deal. We've completed the cycle of this particular trade and this is profitable, let's get out. Well, then you might want to get back in at some point if the conditions are right. And so that's kind of why this thing's here, and I kind of like that because we have no idea that this thing's going to dip back down at this point. It might have kept going on up, and then even here you have time to sell that for a profit. So let's see, then we get this. Not as stoked about this, but this is still in line with how all the stuff was labeled when I'm coming up with the data that I'm training this thing on. This I'm definitely not crazy about, and this is where I'm definitely going to keep. One of the original ideas I had was that we have slots for trades. So if the bot encounters a bunch of really bad buy opportunities and it's just terrible at making decisions because I'm a terrible programmer and I made it that way, then I want it to only have a certain amount of slots that it can act on. So maybe you have 2 slots, right? So if it opens a trade, one of those slots is occupied. If it opens a second trade, now both of your slots are occupied and it's not going to be able to buy again until you sell. And so it frees up one of those slots, like seats in a car, And so here I'm kind of okay with this if this happens pretty rarely, but I would really ideally like to be able to identify this kind of pattern, because the reason it's doing this, like in hindsight you can look at this, you can say, oh man, that was a terrible place to buy, but there's been a pretty significant little drop off here, and for all we know the price is going to keep zigzagging up like it's been doing here. So I don't have like a great feature yet that's going to help me not make a purchase at this point. But if most of the points are like this, like we see, where it's buying in an attractive place, and then you have one of these kind of, problem points, then that's not that big of a deal for me if I only have a few slots, and maybe this happens every once in a while. And I'm also thinking of ways that I can kind of pause trades. Like maybe we believe that at some point in time, like we made a bad trade, we can review that as we look at how the bot's acting, and we could say, you know what, we're going to pause this thing. We're going to kind of temporarily archive this trade, and then at some point in the future, when the price is back in the ballpark, we're going to reintroduce this thing so that the bot can kind of free that slot again. We'll see. Don't know how that's going to play out. Pan out, but I thought this was pretty interesting, because this is, if I had been running this stuff we trained on all that data May to November, early November. Now, if I was actually running this thing in production, it would have been making decisions that were for sure profitable, which is good to see. But what we really need to do now is also see how this is going to look on the selling side, and then build up some data sets that are going to say, all right, we buy at this point, we sell at this other point. We buy at this point, we sell at this other point. So we can really kind of see, play out a simulation where we're going to see how profitable is this thing really, and how often do we get choked up on some of these trades where we're either going to have to increase the number of slots we have available to keep opening new trades, or we're going to have to pause or archive trades or sell at a loss or whatever so that we can get back into the market. Because otherwise, like the way that I had implemented this thing a year ago, if we had a bad trade like this, it would just wait and wait and wait until the price went up and it was profitable to sell, which could be a long time. So anyways, just wanted to give that update. We are now at the point where we are running these simulations. We're seeing, training up the model on all this historical data and data that is not the symbol itself that we want to make trades on. Then we are learning those patterns, applying them to new data we've never seen before, coming straight from the API, and making these predictions. So we've got the buy side in a pretty decent place. I'd be happy even putting this into practice with a little bit of money, seeing how it goes in real life. But first, I want to visit that idea of when is it a good time to sell. I don't want to willy-nilly go selling at any local maximum. I in the previous iteration of this bot, I really didn't like how it would buy at a local minimum, and I felt like it would just sell too soon. So we were making a whole lot of, unless it was on a crazy bull run, it would just turn around, it would sell like as soon as it hit this threshold of we're going to cover the API fees and whatnot, it would sell at like a 1.5% profitability, which would be fine. But part of the reason why we're building this whole set of logic on where we want to buy and sell is that what we saw also is that maybe the bot did buy in at a good time and then it sold at a good time, but then it might see a little dip like this guy right here, and it says, hey, we're at a local minimum, let's buy. And it was just too dumb of a system to know that that's not an attractive place. We can see now that at least this one, maybe it's not that much smarter, but at least it's not buying this thing, So anyways, we'll come back with another update very soon. And until then, I hope that this is interesting, all you other crypto and or data nerds out there. So see you around.